I'd like to, before I talk a little more about Medgar Evers College, actually the women's school, I'd like to give a special thanks to Dr. Seiler and to Professor Safia Bandelli, and as well as to the School of Business. Is the dean still here? Dean Eggy? I'd like to give special thanks and recognition to them for making sure that during Women's History Month, we in fact have a seminar that focuses on women in the workplace, and not women, and women aspiring to high positions in the workplace. And I think it is the work of the women in this college that in fact brings about many wonderful kinds of educational experiences for our students. In particular, I'd like to also acknowledge the Women History Month Committee, because they have set up a wonderful schedule of events during this whole month of March. Well, I'd like to say to us that Medgar Evers College is, in many respects, a women's college, in that over 75%, or just about 75% of our students are women. And they are women at doing a variety of things. Some are married, some are single, some have children, some do not. And they span a large age range, from just out of high school to working women in their, some of them in their, my age, in the 50s, okay? 48% of our faculty here are women. And just about a third of the top administrators at Medgar Evers College are women. But there is not one woman in this institution that holds a top executive position. They're all males. So I think that while we can look at our institution and say, women make a big, they have a big presence here and they make a big contribution. Maybe, I'm not sure, there may be a glass ceiling here for women. I say maybe, because sometimes the issue is not that there's a glass ceiling. It may be that we perceive it, and we as women perceive it, and we don't seek to make that next climb. And I think one of the things that's going to happen today is the women who are with us today will talk to us about how to determine if it is a perception, and if it is not, some of the strategies you might use to reach the glass ceiling. Certainly, we know that women are competent. We know that they're hardworking. We know that they're multi-talented. They are problem solvers, and they are facilitators of cooperation. Those are the kinds of skills that are definitely needed in the workplace. Not to necessarily replace, but to complement and refine the other kinds of skills exemplified by quote-unquote males. At any rate, I'd like for us to sit back and listen to our sisters who are coming here to talk with us today, and use their experiences to help us as women who are along the way and coming along the way to take that next step, to be successful, well-rounded, participating, facilitating human beings. Thank you.
Now I have the pleasure of introducing to you Ms. Safia Bandelli. Safia is the director of the Center for Women's Development here, and she does mighty, mighty work for women, considering that she is a one-woman's shop. And there are many women who volunteer their services to assist her to do the best job that she can do. Safia is one on whose shoulders we stand. That is the thing from last evening's presentation, a tribute to Dr. Betty Shabazz that we held at the Brzezinski Auditorium. Safia, with all the things that she had to do yesterday, like trek up to Albany, rushed down to the Brzezinski Auditorium and did a wonderful presentation. So I'm pleased to introduce to you my sister, Safia Bandelli.
Thank you. Just two housekeeping things. The room is hot. We are going to try to see if we can get some cooling air in it. But it would help if you keep still and if you're quiet. I just want to share some from the presidential proclamation for Women's History Month. You might not know that Women's History Month was declared by the U.S. Congress more than 2 decades, though we haven't been celebrating it that many years. And the thinking behind it was similar, comparable to Black History Month. That is, the contributions of Black people have been largely omitted from the U.S. history. Therefore, we declare February Black History Month. Similarly, the contributions of women have been largely omitted through U.S. history. So Women's History Month is March. But then when we look at when they included women, quite often it was not women of color, so then we have more work still to do around talking about inclusion in the full sense of the word. So the proclamation from President Edison O. Jackson here at Medgar reads, whereas women have created and helped to sustain the entire institutional infrastructure of life and culture around the world and have been tireless in their efforts to organize and sustain the events around which the life of every community revolves, and whereas we cannot accurately comprehend or assess our hidden potential without understanding the struggle against virtually insurmountable obstacles that our foremothers waged, and whereas it is our belief that history should liberate us from ignorance and help us to construct a new future by informing our behavior about the unique and significant contributions that women have made to a country founded on the principle that, quote unquote, all men are created equal. And whereas we are the sum of what we believe and do, now therefore be it resolved that the month of March is proclaimed as Women's History Month at Medgar Evers College of the City University of New York, and that the president of the college, in so proclaiming, hereby calls upon the college community to observe such month with appropriate ceremonies and activities to create a heightened awareness about women, their contributions and their struggles, which have made our survival and progress possible. So that's the proclamation, and today is about as we wind down the month, this is the 27th, we've had a month of wonderful activities, so we do continue with April and May, talking about the particular contributions of women and really trying to get us to shift our thinking when we think about power and leadership. Traditionally, the thinking is male, so we want to shift that, and part of the shifting is to bring women who are in business, who are in corporate America, and who have found the key to success, which is doing work that you love. And I think another part of that is doing work that you love and getting paid well for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. One of the things that Dr. Withers failed to mention, and since we have a large number of female students here, is that the student government presidents have all been men over a 10-year period. I think we've had one female student government president in the last 10 years at this institution. So you might want to really learn from today's presentation, ladies. What I would like to do now is to take the time to introduce our speakers. As I said, I'm going to give you just a snapshot of each individual. You may read this when you have some time or as you listen to their presentations and want to verify information. Arlene Barnes is Senior Judge of Superior Court of the District of Columbia. Included among Judge Barnes' professional appointments, she has been an Assistant U.S. Attorney, Administrative Judge in the Department of the Interior, and Associate Judge in the Superior Court. Judge Barnes is a member of several boards: the National Cathedral School Board, Maryland District of Columbia Utilities Association Board, National Women's Law Center Board, and the Greater Washington Boys and Girls Club Board. She is also a member of the D.C. Mayor's Commission on Violence Against Women, Chair of Citizens Board for Providence Hospital, and outside Director of Century National Bank. Judge Barnes is married, the proud mother of 2 children, and resides in Washington, D.C. Would you stand, please, Judge Barnes? next person that I am going to introduce is Aileen S. Roberts. Many of you who are faculty probably remember Aileen's affiliation with Medgar Evers College in years ago when she began working with Philip Morris and companies. Aileen Roberts is the founder, chairwoman, and chief executive of this not-for-profit organization, which is the American Women's Forum for Economic Development Strategies, Incorporated. The principal mission of American Women's Forum is to conduct relevant research regarding the money management and investment behavior of low to moderate income American families. Importantly, American Women's Forum will develop programs that provide the audience with financial and economic education. Ms. Roberts is the recipient of numerous honors, including Coalition of Black Trade Unionists Harriet Tubman Award, the New York Urban League Building Brick Award, and National Black Police Association Outstanding Service Award. On May 6, 1992, her accomplishments were entered into the 102nd Congressional Record by the United States Representative Adolphus Towns. To mark her significant contribution to the New York City and state community, September 16th was declared Aileen S. Roberts Day in the city of New York. She is a member of the Coalition of 100 Black Women Board of Directors, National Black Caucus of State Legislators Corporate Roundtable, National Association of Black County Officials Business Roundtable, and the Mid-Bronx Senior Citizens Council Board of Directors. The next person is Adrienne Sims. Now, Adrienne comes to us from Catalyst, and she is a Senior Associate Research and Advisory Service. She will tell us about the statistics and where we really are on the corporate ladder in corporate America. Adrienne is the project manager for Catalyst Women of Color Project. The Women of Color Project will examine the following areas: demographics of women of color managers in the private sector, perceptions held by women of color about their opportunities and experiences in corporate management and the effectiveness of diversity initiatives, success factors and barriers that affect career mobility, and strategies to enhance the recruitment, retention, development, and advancement of women of color. Ms. Sims graduated magna cum laude from Texas Women's University with her BS degree in psychology and is currently a doctoral candidate at Rutgers University in organizational psychology. Ms. Sims. Jacqueline B. Gates, who just entered the door, is Vice President, Office of Ethics, Compliance, Diversity, and Organization Development for Bell Atlantic. Prior to her current position, Ms. Gates was Vice President of the Office of Ethics and Business Conduct for NYNEX. Ms. Gates has been cited by Ebony Magazine as one of America's 100 most influential women, or blacks, by Ebony Man as a woman of distinction, by Dollars and Cents Magazine, as one of America's top black business and professional women, and by Good Housekeeping Magazine as one of 100 young women of promise. She is listed in Who's Who among Black Americans. Involved with several national, educational, professional, and civic organizations, Ms. Gates is the past president of the National Association of Negro Business and Professional Women's Club, Incorporated, and the Edges Group, Incorporated. At Bell Atlantic, as with other companies she has worked for, She has initiated and coordinated mentoring programs. She also has been a participant in U.S. delegations to the Soviet Union, the People's Republic of China, and several African nations, including South Africa. Born in Brooklyn, New York, Ms. Gates received her bachelor's degree in history from Brooklyn College. She'll tell us how she decided to change her field, I'm sure, and continued her graduate education at the New School for Social Research in New York City. Ms. Gates is the mother of 3 children and lives in Harrington Park, New Jersey. Ms. Gates, would you just stand again, please? And our panelists will come to you in the following order: Arlene Barnes, Jacqueline Gates, Aileen Roberts, and Adrian Sims.
Good afternoon. Sounds really enthusiastic here today. Maybe it's the heat of the room. I thought that with the caption title for the conference today, Breaking the Glass Ceiling, one attribute that any corporate executive or any professional woman has to keep in mind is to be flexible. And I think today, Dr. Seiler downstairs scurrying around when she realized that we didn't have the auditorium, you have to be flexible and continue to go with the flow, as the statement goes. And so I think that is something that we should keep in mind. Let me first say that I'm delighted to be here today during the month of National Women's Celebration. I was happy to hear that last evening that you did recognize Dr. Betty Shabazz. Last week I was in Washington, and the National Political Congress for Black Women, along with the National Black Press Corps, recognized Dr. C. Dolores Tucker as the outstanding newsmaker of the year, and also recognized Dr. Shabazz for the efforts that she gave in education and social justice. So I was happy to be a part of that event, and I'm happy to see that the college here recognized her. Let me say to Dr. Withers, to Ms. Bendelli, to Dr. Seiler, to the other panelists, and students and friends of Medgar Evers College, I am really happy to be here today. I was told to talk a little bit about the corporate world and breaking that corporate ceiling. You probably said, well, gee, she's a judge, so what corporate ceiling does she have to worry about breaking? Because usually she sets whatever tone there is to set in my day-to-day functionings. But let me tell you, back in 1990, I was a Superior Court judge, an active judge. I was appointed by President Carter in 1979 to sit as an associate judge on that court, which is located in Washington, D.C. And it is a court of general jurisdiction. Handles all cases from civil, felony, landlord, tenant, domestic, you name it, tax, probate. I served there for a little over 10 years, and an executive search company came to me and asked me in 1989-90, would I entertain leaving the bench for a executive level position at a corporate 500 corporation. And I thought about it for a little while and thought then that I probably would want to stay on the bench, but I was convinced, and after talking it over with family and friends, that this might be a new start, so a new change in my career growth and development. And so I was voted in by the board of directors at Potomac Electric Power Company, which is a utility in Washington, D.C. that services all of Washington, D.C., as well as Prince George's County, Maryland, and parts of Montgomery County, Maryland, and some of southern eastern Maryland. It was my first venture into the corporate world. I was hired and voted in as the Vice President of Corporate Relations, which oversaw the areas of government relations, community development, all of the philanthropic work of the corporation. It was expanded after that a couple of years to include economic development and minority business. And then it was also dealing with public policy. So it was a sort of a combination of the law and corporate and community development and public policy. I served there for about 7 years. And then the company, about 2 years ago, decided that they would merge with Baltimore Gas and Electric. And that merger was announced about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, and really sent the company into a topsy-turvy adventure. Those of you who have been in the, and I know I'm looking at Bell Atlantic, I have some friends at Bell Atlantic in DC who we commiserate together through it all, and so who knows, maybe 9X and Bell, you know, will come about. But as a utility, and I like to focus some of my comments, as a utility, but let me go back and say that the merger was announced, and we got geared up for merging with Baltimore Gas and Electric. Baltimore Gas and Electric is bigger than Pepco. They would have at the new company, would have the majority of directors. There would be merging of two companies. And the vote was put before the shareholders. The shareholders of both companies agreed on the merger. And then things got geared up to merge. And I mean, really geared up. That means that there's all sorts of consultants running amok at both at both companies, and there are lawyers, and there are other contractors, and everybody's designing this new company that is going to be better, more efficient, more customer friendly, and being able to compete in the ever-changing world of electricity. For those of you, as an aside, probably saw this week in the paper, the President Clinton has announced his policy for restructuring of the electric industry. It is the last monopoly that will be knocked down. Telecommunications has gone through it, the gas has gone through it, the railroads, and Edison Electric Institute and all of those other trade associations with respect to disseminating electric power in the city and the country. We're holding on to that notion that if it ain't broke, then you don't need to fix it. Unfortunately, as it may be deemed, determined on which side of the fence you're on, change is coming. And change is coming, and it's going to be swift in some areas, and it will be not so swift in others. But I dare say that in the new millennium, you will be able to select, where you buy your power, just like you select your long-distance services. And there are going to be some guidelines with respect to the distribution of and the consumption of electrical utility, but it's changing. And so, in the face of this restructuring, Pepco and Baltimore Gas and Electric decided to merge, and for 2 years, they went about going through job descriptions for the new company, doing hires for the new company, having people compete for the jobs, going through various types of policy changes that would be in place for the new company, attempting to get regulatory approval from FERC to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to all of your state regulatory agencies, as well as the Department of Justice with respect to the antitrust laws, which, as some of you probably know, that Lockheed is probably having some problems with that in its merger too. In the wave of mergers, getting bigger and stronger and being able to compete and to control, Pepco and Baltimore Gas and Electric got into the same level. Unfortunately, after over 2 years, after restaffing almost 2/3 of the workforce in both companies and getting down to the last third of the placement, the regulatory bodies, both in Maryland and in the district, gave tentative approval to the merger, but put with it several conditions that made it not as profitable to do the merger, and the merger was abandoned this past about 4 months ago, last month. And you can imagine what that did to the staff. Well, now, with respect to me, I had indicated that once the company was merging, that I would not be staying with the new company. And I chose, after 7 years, to make another change in my life. I kind of like change, so I mean, it's always as exciting the last time as it was the first. So I had decided to make a move in any event and would not be staying. So I left Pepco last July and assumed a status that I had even while I was at Pepco, and that being a senior judge. And you say, why did you do that? Well, the judicial retirement in D.C., the federal judicial retirement, particularly for Superior Court, after serving 10 years on the bench, you are eligible to retire and to take senior status. So I did. So I got certified as a senior judge right when I left the court, and was recertified. You get certified every 4 years, and was recertified 4 years thereafter, and was held in an inactive status. And so when it was time to leave PEPCO, I just reactivated my status. And so I'm back to sitting, and it's a new perspective. But let me turn though to what I gained from the corporate side, because I went to PEPCO coming from the public sector, and as a public servant, albeit from the bench, you know, there are certain limitations, particularly on funding, expenditures, and I got right into the groove in terms of corporate life and corporate living. But let me say that there's one little anecdote that I can share with you. It was about the first week or so of being at the company, and there was a board meeting, and all the officers were to meet in the boardroom. And then I had been in the boardroom when I started, actually when they voted me in, and the CEO had me there to meet my colleagues, the other officers. And at that time, there were no other women officers. Actually, the first woman officer at PEPCO was and is a friend of mine, Sharon Pratt Kelly, who was the first woman and Afro-American to be an officer of the company. And I came after Sharon, who, of course, those of you probably know, ran for mayor and was successful for her first term. And so I walked in, they told us that this board meeting was to start at 3 o'clock. And no one had really schooled me to, you know, the protocol of the boardroom. And so I go running upstairs in the elevator, and I get to near the entrance of the boardroom, and it was about 2:55, and I see the CEO, and I said, well, I guess I'm not late. You're walking in now. And as he opened the door, everybody was seated all around the table, and I said, oh. And he sort of laughed, and I said, oh, I see. A 3 o'clock meeting means that you get there at least 10:03, get your seat, and you do not walk into the boardroom late. Okay, so I mean, but he had fun with me, because as I got in, there was no seats for me, and he said, well, sit beside me. But I mean, I said, I never walk in late again, you know? So it's something that you really have to understand about corporate culture. And I want to talk about the utility industry specifically, because that's my background, but I think the applications go across the board. First of all, as I indicated, PEPCO, along with Baltimore Gas and Electric, and along with all your utilities, those here, Con Ed, those in Jersey, I mean, you name it, they're all going through restructuring, and so you have to look at what is really important in your job as a corporate executive. And there are really 3 areas that you have to always keep your eyes on, and that is the revenues that come in, that is your product, who buys your product, and you know, and expanding the base on that product. Lowering the expenses, and I'm not going to get into everything, but I mean that goes from cost for anything that you use, whether it is employee costs, healthcare costs, supplies, cost of fuel, because the lower expenses are going to give what? And this is the bottom line, profits. And that you have to have a profitable company, or else you can't do the things that you need to do in that community that you serve. A company that is not making any profits, is not holding on to its own and growing and thriving, it's not going to make it. I mean, it's just as simple as that. So I used to tell my son, you know, in the summer months, that I was so happy when it got to be 90 and 100 in D.C. And Jason said, oh, but it's so hot, Pa, it's hot. I said, Jason, revenue, son. That means people are using our product, you know. And then when March comes along, Mommy may get something extra for the use of that product, you know. And he kind of got the message after a while, so he would go around saying, I'm so happy it's so hot, but that means more money for my mommy. So, but in terms of revenues, you have to keep in mind, and this is one of the areas that I've really enjoyed working in Washington, D.C., is that revenues are conditioned upon growth and regional growth and economic development. And economic development, for me, especially in Washington, D.C., meant not only economic development of tourism or any of your beltway types of companies, but economic development for Black Americans. Because in the District of Columbia, which is about 70% Black, and then in the surrounding jurisdictions where there's Prince George's County, those of you who don't know, it's a predominantly Black county of very middle class and upper Blacks and people of color. And then there's Montgomery County, which is sort of the reverse of Prince George's County. We were trying to stimulate economic growth and development, and particularly economic growth and development for minority vendors. So to the extent that the economy grew, so did Pepco, and so does Baltimore Gas and Electric. And that means that you have situations where you expand your customer base. Customers then will have choices with respect to ways in which to utilize our product. Issues of new technology and conservation becomes key to being competitive. And let me turn quickly to lowering of expenses. When you think about lowering expenses, you think about employee base, and we start talking about downsizing, and re-engineering and becoming more efficient. That was done even before there were talks of mergers. Pepco had cut back its workforce significantly to meet the competing demands of competition. And there are all sorts of human relations issues. I mean, the company itself, just before I got to it in '90, was faced with a large class action suit with respect to discrimination. That suit was resolved by way of settlement in 91 for the tune of pretty much near $35 to $40 million. There were certain conditions met upon the settlement of that suit that had to be put in place by way of employee training, diversity training, numerous types of HR, human resources issues that had to be made. New management strategies were put into place to deal with the changing utility and the changing corporate world. We knew that change was coming. We knew restructuring was not going to turn its head and go away. So you had to prepare yourself for competition and for being competitive in this ever-changing world, to retain your customer base and look at ways of expanding it. Greater profits. I mean, that's the bottom line. It was always something that was just drilled into you as to being able to have the company be healthy, to have profits so that you could do the kind of, particularly the philanthropic, the schools, all of the community activities that you would do. Keeping the rates for the customers low, making sure that the shareholders are happy so that they will continue to buy your stock. So all of those three areas are key areas in terms of operating in the corporate world. What does it mean for a Black woman? As I indicated, historically, the utilities have been historically male and historically white. And that was the case when I arrived at Pepco. Things are changing as you move up in the management ladder. But it is still, when you go to the national conferences and the Edison Electric Institute annual meetings, you'll look around and you can still count the number of people on one hand. So what do we have to do? I think that you have to find your niche. You have to be flexible. You have to, study hard and long, whether or not you're going to be an engineer, whether or not you're going to be a computer specialist, whether or not you're going to be in law, whether or not you're going to be in any of the types of public management areas where you can apply your level of expertise to enhancing the company's ability to be more user-friendly, more proficient with respect to new technologies and developing ways in which there can be a different fuel mix that can have the cost of electricity held down so that, of course, the profits will go as we expand the customer base. And you have to be ever cognizant of the fact that you are where you are, and there are certain expectations that you have to get into. The timing, punctuality is such a key in corporations, and it's not only in the corporations, but it is expected when you get outside of the corporation. So, I mean, I don't know how to stress that any more than I can, that you need to just get it in your mind that you're going to be on time. I don't care if everybody else is late, you're there. And it sets a tone of professionalism. It sets a tone that you mean business and that you're serious about what you do. Being prepared. I don't care who you are, knowing that you have the knowledge and that you have read what you're supposed to have read and are able to not only retain it, but to present it back and present it back in a very understandable fashion is key. And so you really have to read and make sure, and get out there. I mean, a lot of times you have mentors in the companies that will assist you and tell you what's going on in terms of the corporate culture, but it's up to you to read the journals, to read the articles, to be well-versed on what's going on in a day-to-day basis. I mean, you could go into a meeting at 11 o'clock and somebody could be talking about something that happened in the region that was in the paper. I haven't read the paper yet, you're out of luck. I mean, you need to, I don't care if you have to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and get the paper delivered early. You have to know what's going on, particularly what's going on that's going to impact directly or indirectly on your business. So reading and being caught up on the current events is crucial. It's crucial. And the other is being yourself. I think that it's important to really be yourself and not try to be something that you're not, because people will readily see through that. And you will find that, yes, maybe you will have some times where you have to be kind of blunt and you have to be very diplomatic and you have to be tactful, but people will appreciate that. And I think that as you move up in the corporate ladder and you show your level of proficiency, your level of flexibility, your level of not fearing change. Because change is what keeps a lot of people back. A lot of people say, well, I've been doing this for the last 20-some years, or I've been doing it this way, or I've been doing it that way, and I'm not ready to change. And that's all right. They won't change, but they won't be there either. So, and that's very key, that you have people who are flexible, who know that, I may have to learn something a different way, because the way we did before, they're not doing it anymore. So it's a notion that will carry you forward, whether it's in corporation, in an academic setting, whether it is in life raising a family, and whether it is in law. And I can certainly tell you now, being back on the bench, it certainly is so in the application of the jurisprudence system, that you have to be flexible and you have to remember to be yourself and excel to
What's always interesting about these panels is we don't rehearse ahead of time, but what's nice is how we complement one another in terms of our sharing. So I think the focus that I'll take in my view and review of the corporate world is to focus a little bit more on you and what it's been like, especially having been born and spent about 32 years of my adult life here in Brooklyn. So I probably could remember sitting in a seat like yours, but it was probably very, very different in terms of who might have been standing in front of this podium delivering a women's history presentation. I'd like to open with this. I imagine that I've traveled from my finance company in New York to meet with a gentleman in California. I envision myself wearing a blue business suit with an off-white and blue printed scarf tied around my neck. And I've just negotiated a couple $100,000 in bonds for a promising entrepreneur. After I sign on the dotted line, I stand up and I shake my associate's hand to secure the deal. A few hours later, I begin to converse with my seatmate on the flight back to New York. While engaging in conversation, I find out that this young lady wants to be a bonds trader. This brings back memories of when I first started. In college, I majored in business administration. I remember thinking that I needed a more general course of study than finance or economics. I wanted a lot of versatility. I knew that I may have changed my mind about which area of business I pursued as a career. Therefore, I liked the fact that I had a variety of subjects to study in business administration. Considering my sanguine, choleric personality traits, I have a knack for planning, organizing, and managing. I'm also extremely motivated and driven to hard work. Overcome with ambition, I was determined to achieve my goals with integrity. Moreover, I am an exceptionally shrewd negotiator. Bonds trading was my first choice in the career. I wanted to eventually develop my own finance company, specializing in bonds, yet including stock market areas. Through my career, I wanted to give something back to my community. I wanted to target the Black community and their businesses. I also was striving to educate them about how to increase and improve their financial situations. I smiled, completing my thoughts. I've worked hard, but I love my work and have no desire to change my career. As the stewardess announces for the cabin to get prepared for landing, I pull my seat back to an upright position, put up my tray table, and realize I am blessed to have accomplished so much. I didn't write this. I received this in the mail a couple of days ago from one of my mentees who's just been accepted to a university in Atlanta. And I said, how do I share with you some of the history in terms of those of us who have worked in the corporate sector and whether or not the glass ceiling has been shattered. If I had written this, if I was writing in 1968 when I graduated from Erasmus Hall High School, it would never have sounded like this. My sister? All right. Okay. I wouldn't have known what bonds were. I wouldn't have understood trading. In my family, you were going to get an education, and you were going to be a professional, and you looked at the role models, and they were always the lawyers and the doctors and the teachers, the nurses. But even in that regard, I would never have had so much focus. It would have been to get a college degree first. I remember growing up in Brooklyn and being a member of the National Association of Negro Business and Professional Women, a youth member. Ironically, in 1968, I attended a convention, and one of our speakers here today was in her beginning career in a corporation. My role models at that time were my chaperones, because we were a youth group, we had to have adult supervision. And they worked for New York Telephone Company. They were telephone operators. The interesting thing is they never once encouraged me to work for New York Telephone Company, because each generation wants the next generation to do better. And when they looked up, they didn't see anybody who looked like them. And so when I became the first African-American female vice president of NYNEX, which was New York Tel in its birthdays, I had to recognize that it was those shoulders that I was standing on to accept the vice presidency. That if it wasn't for them paying the dues as operators, many times being the first African Americans in a corporate setting, even if it was at the floor of the operation, they still had to demonstrate the same kind of skills and competencies that I have to demonstrate today, because there are some just basic values that we expect in the workplace. And so, in any discussion on Women's History Month, as we do in the celebration of Black History Month, we must pay tribute to those who have come before us. Just as in Black History Month, I would share with you that the most important values are the same values of the 7 principles of life that we tend to only talk about during Kwanzaa. And when I look at those principles, those are the winning ways that we promote at our corporation, and I'm sure if I shared them with Judge Barnes, they would be very similar at PEPCO. Of course, the first one is unity. Striving for maintaining unity between our family, our community, our nation, our race. If we were to extend this to the corporate sector, the role that our companies play in that community. Working together for the common good is a concept in Japanese communities. Self-determination, to define ourselves and speak for ourselves instead of being defined and spoken for by others. And that is so critical, especially for women. And I have very strong relationships with the brothers, so this is not about not being focused on the brothers, but it is Women's History Month. We have been defined since the inception of humanity. We have roles, and as time has changed, and given some circumstances that we as a people and we as sisters have had to go through, it has been very challenging for us to recognize our changing roles and to feel comfortable in those changing roles. So the leadership that seems to just be coming out now isn't new. We have always been leaders, but at certain times in our humanity, it has been stifled more than others. We have also been defined in some of our environments to have to play more of a breadwinner's role than in others. And I just watched Like It Is on Sunday to learn more about the whole female mutilation issue, and to know that that whole concept of tradition is not necessarily being carried on right now or promoted by the men in those societies, but by the women because of the economics that are assigned because they are the major breadwinners. And so when we look into the whole issue of prostitution, very often it's because of economics why a woman is defined by that role. And if we look at single motherhood, much of what we have had to do and sacrifice is because of the economics or the role defined by others. So self-determination and being self-defined, especially for us women, is very, very important. Collective work and responsibility is another value. To build and maintain our community, our families, and to make our brothers and sisters' problems our problems. If you read the February issue of Black Enterprise magazine, there's an article about the loneliness of Black executives at the top of the house, because we do have to live in two worlds. Now, we all live in two worlds, right? We may live in multiple, more than two worlds. But in the corporate sector, it is a white and a colored world. Since I promote diversity in our corporation, sometimes I'll use the colored or the people of color as opposed to just African Americans. But when you look at having to live in those two worlds, yes, there are basic values, but there are also the differences that we have to recognize so that we can operate effectively in that other world. So I can talk a lot about my sisters here, and may feel that way about every woman that I work with in the corporate sector, but may not be as comfortable saying sister at the podium as I am feeling comfortable saying it here. And very often I will use sister to the white women, especially when there's an endearing type of relationship between us, because woman to woman, it is a sisterhood. But it is a much more comfortable term when I am at home as opposed to being in the corporate sector. And it's important to recognize that there are languages and different languages that are approved and not as approved. Those are the choices that Judge Barnes was talking about when she said that you need to understand what makes you happy. Because if you feel that that's selling out, that you cannot use certain language, that you can't necessarily dress any way you want, then that's not the world for you. But if you love that paycheck, and if you love the benefits that are afforded to you, then you have to make some choices, and you have to make some adjustments. But never would I expect to sell out. And I'll give you an example of how you can be misread. Very innocently, but how negative an impact it could have long term. I've worked for a number of corporations. I've just been with Bell Atlantic and the former NYNEX for the last almost 8 years. And prior to that, I couldn't keep a job. I was with companies 2 years, every 2 years. Aileen would call me and she'd say, what company are you with now, Jackie? And there was a time that I was moving from JCPenney, which was my first corporate experience, to Revlon. And I went for the interview. The headhunter called me back after the interview with the VP and said, you did great, Jackie, they really love you, but you were a little bit too militant. And I said, militant? My mother would have a stroke if that word was ever associated with her child. What did I do? What did I say? And she said, well, it wasn't what you said, it's what you had on. And that time I didn't wear anything Afrocentric, I didn't think. I had on my little polyester suit, and I was coming from JCPenney. And I had a pin that looked like an apple, and it had red as an apple, it had a green leaf, and it had black equal sign in the middle.
That's it.
Right? That's it, right? That's the colors. As I said, oh, we talking about my pin? Yeah, it's red, black, and green, but it's the insignia for the Urban League, which I'm a board member of. Proud to. And he saw the red, black, and green only. The good news is the headhunter was able to interpret that, and they offered me the position, and I actually had a great career working with that organization, and a very strong friendship developed with that individual. But that's what can happen when there's a lack of understanding, or when you don't feel strongly about who you are and what you represent. Because I wasn't sorry about my pin. I felt very proud, that's why I had it on. But differences in how we look, what we say, can be interpreted and can have long-term impact on you. And so you need to understand that in the way that you present yourself. Cooperative economics is one of our values, to build and maintain our own stores and shops and other businesses. And I know both of my co-panelists have very strong backgrounds in economic development. And one of the beauties of working in corporate America is that you are working in an environment where there are resources that can be transferred to your community. If you can demonstrate some credibility and commitment to that entity and help them to understand the value of transferring those dollars. Because a strong community for Petco or Bell Atlantic means that they have stronger customer support. Their customers can buy and afford more of their services, as opposed to it being just a giveaway. Having a sense of purpose to make our collective and individual vocation of building and developing our community in order to restore our people to the greatness that we know is a part of our tradition. If we could come together in a common purpose more often, even recognizing that there is diversity among us, because unfortunately you look at one race of people and assume that they are all the same. And that is a message that quite often in the workplace I have to help some of our colleagues to understand, that there is diversity among Africans, people of African descent. There is diversity among Latinos. There is diversity among Asians, because they love to just throw us in certain buckets. We have one bucket, for example, where I got a call when I was the diversity leader a couple of years ago, and they said, there's a major diversity problem going on in this work location. So I went down there, and lo and behold, it was all black women. And I said, how did this happen? Number one, had to be about 100 and something black women in one work location. Look at the managers, well, they didn't look like they were black. Lo and behold, half of the black women were American blacks, and the other half were from the West Indies. So they assumed that that was the problem. And yeah, we sometimes forget how to treat one another. Respect thing kind of goes out the window. But when we cut back, or peel the onion back, we realize that it wasn't the difference in the heritage of these individuals. but it was that the managers were not treating them with respect. And so what they did was to act out against one another. You know, that happens in our families. You know, when mommy and daddy ain't acting right with one another, it has an impact on our children. And so the same thing happens in the workplace. And so a sense of purpose and a unified purpose is quite important. Creativity, to do always as much as we can in the way that we can in order to leave our community more beautiful and beneficial than when we inherited it. And creativity allows you to be able to do a lot with little. That's that cutting back on resources. That is the name of the game in every entity, whether it's private sector or public sector. But we as a people, people of color, have been used to doing a lot with little resource. And so it's always amazing when they find that even if they cut off this amount of money, you're able to do even better. Don't like to admit it, but you're able to do better. And then lastly, but probably for me, most importantly, because I'm here to tell you that you can smash through the glass ceiling. I know there was a time when I didn't think it was possible, and I put all of my energies into my outside activities. And then I came into this company, and all of a sudden I started getting recognized for things that all along I knew I had been developed to know how to do, but in the other companies, they just didn't get it. So I know, though, that it's because of my faith in God. And everything that I have, I give him praise and honor. I cannot stand before you saying that anything is because of me. It's nothing because of my parents or my mentors or the supervisor that I have. God guides every one of them to where they have been supportive of me. And when we can have the faith, it will get you through all of the challenges, and those glass ceilings will be broken. I want to share with you 15 elements of being a professional or being a successful professional. Because you can be professional, or tell yourself you're professional, but you're not necessarily successful. And one is what Judge Barnes shared with you, evaluating yourself and your desired occupation. And one of the things that we need to stop asking is, what do you want to do after you graduate? What do you want to be when you grow up? Because you already heard Judge Barnes talk about several careers. You'll hear Aileen talk about that. I have had several careers, both in public service as a family counselor. I've been in human resources. I'm now an ethicist for the corporation, which means I hold the values and lead the corporate conscience in terms of our compliance and the standards that we adhere to. So you are going to have several careers. You are all multi-talented, and you don't have to give up one for the other. What you might need to do is prioritize. Which one may give you what you need today? Maybe today you need to feel good about yourself, and you don't have to worry because you're not in a relationship or you don't have family responsibilities, others dependent upon you. But you do need to decide, you do need to have a plan, you do need to set goals, and you can set roadmaps. Don't do it the way we did it. A lot of us, it was hit or miss, right? And you just ended up in the right place at the right time because we didn't have people coming and talking to us like this. We had family members supporting us, but we didn't always have the critical mass of professionals who can come back and give us the kind of pointers and help you to avoid the pitfalls that we did. Telling you to be on time, because nobody is going to tell you to arrive at that meeting on time. They tell you the time of the meeting. The corporate culture is not going to be shared with you because there's an assumption, and especially when you come in at the top of the house, that you know all the rules, and that's when you begin to learn that there are a whole different set of rules and opportunities and benefits, etc. Eliminating negative thoughts and people from your life. I don't think I have to go into great detail because this looks like a successful group of folks, but very often the people closest to you add a lot of negativity. And we, there's a sister in the audience, Sister Harard, and she and I have a common, a mutual friend, Les Brown. And he says, get rid of those toxic people. It's real, my brothers and sisters, my sisters. You don't belong to anybody else. Do not allow them to define you and add negativity to your life. There's a book out right now, Smart Women, Smart Choices. It is written by Hattie Hill. She had the first version called Women Who Carry Their Men. It changed my life 2 years ago. As successful as I am standing in front of you, there are elements of the life experience that would make your skin crawl. When you learn that you don't have to have negative people in your life. Perfect the art of listening. The first time I got a 360 review, that's our kind of report card. But it's not just the teacher reviewing you. You know how you go in class and you sit next to someone every day? Well, guess what? Your peer gets to review you too. It means you really need to get along with other people. So a 360 is a report card that has your supervisor, peers, and if you manage people, your subordinates reviewing you. I was working for the president of 9X Mobile at the time, an African-American male, and I knew from the comments that it was from him, and he said I wasn't a good listener. So I've always told him that it's because I'm from Brooklyn and I think so fast and I try to respond before you even say anything. But you know, I can't come to Brooklyn and say that, okay? But you need to listen. When you listen, you're able to get a full view of the other person. And when you have that full view, there is going to be better understanding between the two of you. If you don't listen to your supervisor, you may not get the full benefit of the direction that your supervisor is giving you. And if you don't listen to a peer, the teamwork can't be accomplished as great as the potential is. So listening is very, very important. Judge Barnes talked about reading. And I would say when I'm in the community, read the black media outputs. Subscribe to the JET, because if you don't, you won't know we exist. Because if you only look at the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, you'll never see us. So it's important to be able to read those business documents, but it's also important to read documents that lift us up and show the best of what our community has to offer. And share it, because I know most of you work. Leave a JET or an Emerge or maybe not Emerge, because Emerge is like real dramatic, you know, and some of your white colleagues may not understand it. But no, they're educational tools. And I make sure, in fact, I told the chairman that I was going to subscribe to JET magazine for him, because I'll go in and tell him something about what's going on in the black community. He's like, whoa. And so it's an educational tool for us, but also for those who are different from us. Associate yourself with successful people or people with similar goals. Look, act, and dress for the role. Now, you may want to be a trendsetter, but you need to look at the people who you want to be like, that you want to send into their type. Look at how they dress. If you choose not to dress like that, then that's the choice, and then you deal with the consequences. That's why if you want to get into the corporate sector, it's a very simple formula. Blue and white for your interview. Real simple. And that gives you extra points, because they think then that you know how to dress. Then when you get in, you do what you want to do. But sincerely, dress for success is blue and white on the interview. If you have 3 interviews, don't worry about it, because you're probably going to end up with different people anyway. Do not dress like you're going to a disco. Okay, keep the jewelry and everything down. Make it a conservative look. Use correct grammar. The art of conversation is to communicate. I can't stress how important that is. So it's not just the verbal grammar, but what is on your resume. When those of us who are in the corporate sector have opportunities and we look at resumes, we immediately start trying to differentiate. So the easiest way is to look at the ones that have errors and put them aside. So you didn't even get to talk to the person. person may have more than the other individual, but remember, the first representation of you is that resume. So as much as we put into the purchase of sneakers and all of these other high-ticket items, I think that the investment in the resume is worth that much more because it can be your ticket to the future. Always be prompt. Judge Barnes illustrated that, and I apologize since I was late coming here. Steer clear of company gossip. You know, we very often think that gossip allows us to get to know other people and share things that people like to hear. It can get you into more trouble. And today in the workplace, I can't tell you how the respect element is missing so dramatically that, gentlemen, what you say and how you treat women in the workplace, and recent case law also says how you treat another man. And it has nothing to do whether or not it's a sexual advance only, because most people think that sexual harassment is around me asking to go to bed with you. If you treat me differently because I am a woman in a non-traditional position, that is a type of sexual harassment, and vice versa. So we need to be very careful and knowledgeable. What is the law? What can I do? And the basic recommendation is just not keep to yourself in terms of isolating yourself, but your private business is your private business. And there is a fine line, because sometimes we are misunderstood as though we don't like to socialize. So you've got to strike a balance, but staying clear of company gossip is important. Not neglecting your family and others who are important to you. In our organization, one of our winning ways is called balanced perspective. It means in the old days, the way that you got over was working 25 hours a day. I'm married to the job, so if I look like I'm there working all these long hours, I'm going to get brownie points. We know that people who work 25 hours a day have no life. If you have no life, you can look at the person and see how dysfunctional they are. And so the valuable person to our organization is the one who has a balanced perspective. We want you to treat your family well. We want you to be an active part of the family. We know the difference. When my staff comes in and I see some behaviors, I immediately say, go get a life. Expect disappointment, expect disloyalty, expect pettiness, and expect ignorant behavior, because they're real and they will be happening in your work environment. But don't get stuck in that negativity. Don't let it allow you to become a whiner, a complainer. Move on, but expect it. Try as much as possible, again, to keep your personal life separate from your job. There's just a recent study this week that I think about 40% of employees have affairs at work. It leads to nowhere, my brothers and sisters. Keep your goals in mind and believe in yourself. Always have pride in your roots, who you are, where you came from, and take time to relax. I think it will be important for you to hear from the next speaker. She's been very, very supportive to me in my career. And we don't see each other that often, but I can tell you that she's a fine person, and sisterhood is very strong. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Are you ready to go to classes? I want to thank Sister Gates for her kind, wonderful, and informative, and instructive, and interesting remarks. And Judge Barnes as well. My first meeting, it was a pleasure. I would like to begin my remarks where Sister Gates left off by thanking God for bringing us all together here to celebrate Women's History Month at Medgar Evers College. And I wish to thank Dr. Seiler and her colleagues for convening this and planning and convening this event. marking a special occasion, I want to congratulate them for their efforts. I'm also pleased to visit Brooklyn and Medgar Evers again. Certainly it's an honor to be invited to this distinguished educational institution that has become renowned for its participation, activity, and commitment to working within the community. But it's also a delight to be here because of some of the faculty members and Brooklyn friends with whom I've had long-standing relationships, including Dr. Seiler, John Plateau, Dr. Marcella Maxwell, the late and much admired Charles Ennis, President Edison Jackson, and of course our sister Betty Shabazz, who will remain in our hearts always, and I'm delighted again that you all have honored her during this month's activities. As we indicated with the three speakers, we've been asked to talk about our experiences in corporate America, the impact of downsizing, attributes needed to succeed in the world of work, all of which have been drawn from my more than 25 years of corporate experience, which hopefully will bring some unique perspective to what I hope will be useful to the young men and women here this afternoon. Participation in this program will also provide me an opportunity to share with you some information about the organization that I now chair, the American Women's Forum for Economic Development Strategies. But before I proceed further, allow me to describe at least a synopsis of my corporate experience. In April 1967, I joined Philip Morris, at the time a medium-sized tobacco company. The civil rights movement was gaining momentum by then, and as a result, I became one of the first African-American sales representatives in that industry. I later held positions of increasing responsibility in sales management, sales training and development, government relations, and corporate affairs. And for those of you who might be unfamiliar with the nature of government and public affairs, I was basically a lobbyist for them for the last 10 years of my tenure at Philip Morris. Before joining Philip Morris, I was a professional fashion model, one of the first women of color, I reluctantly admit, in that industry as well. I'm a graduate of Bronx Community College, Baruch College. I studied advanced management courses at Hunter College and the University of Michigan. Clearly, I'm a beneficiary of the civil rights movement and the trade union movement, and the pioneering efforts of others that helped remove barriers to fair employment. By the way, with regard to fair employment, as our sisters have indicated, there are still some areas of improvement that need and will hopefully take place. There was much excitement, optimism, and great expectation in the 60s as Black women and men and others of the minority groups began to move into work environments that had heretofore been closed to us. There was a belief that given the opportunity to compete, we could learn how the corporate system worked, become a part of its establishment, help affect positive change from within, and make it better for others in the future. Moreover, if you found a good job, whether it be in the public or private sector, and you performed well, you had a realistic expectation to secure employment until you retired. The compact that developed between employer and employee became viewed as an important element for business success and the greater good for the communities and the country. Unfortunately, few at the time factored in what I think has become a growing concern about greed, to be quite honest with you, in the corporate environment. Key elements, though, for planning for a successful career that were taught 30 years ago, in my view, are still very germane, and our sister Gates articulated them very succinctly and clearly. Among them, of course, get the best education you can, develop a lifelong plan to continue your education, involve yourself in extracurricular activities that are designed to help build self-esteem and self-confidence, establish alliances within your community, and participate in political and volunteer activities. Additionally, if possible, travel, study the cultures and languages of others, explore career options that bring personal satisfaction and pleasure, not solely the financial rewards therein. Research the companies and industries in which you might be interested in working. While some progress has been made by Black women in business, and there have been a number of success stories cited here today, and there are many, there are new realities that you will face that will require new approaches if you are to be successful in your career. And I know we're saying some of the same things, but if you will bear with me, I'd like to just articulate some of the perspectives that I experienced and you will experience. The proliferation of corporate mergers and acquisitions, which was discussed, with their resultant downsizing and restructuring, has had a negative impact on Blacks in my view. One need look no further than the financial services industries right here in New York. In the last 20 years, Urban Trust, Manufacturers Hanover Trust, Chemical Bank Corp., and at least 15 medium-sized or large Wall Street firms have been acquired or have been merged with larger companies. The ITT Corporation, one of the largest employers in New York for the last 30 years, was acquired last month. Thousands of jobs have been lost and more will probably continue to be lost as a result. Since we generally represent a minority population, especially in the supervisory, management, and executive ranks, we generally are disproportionately affected. The disillusion of affirmative action programs that have had a chilling effect on Blacks and other minority groups in the workplace are continuing to change and be impacted upon. And that impact, the impact of the last wave of anti-affirmative action initiatives on contracting and educational opportunity should certainly alarm us all. As well-intended as so-called diversity programs may be, Blacks and women may benefit least from them. I know Sister Gates is very much involved in diversity, and what we're beginning to see is that because of the influx of so many diverse ethnic, cultural groups, there has somehow been a diminution of some of the African American or African males' participation. I say that not to dissuade or discourage you, but to just call it to your attention, which you probably know already. But if there are truly fair employment and diverse programs, also in my view, these programs will probably not be as necessary and promoted as they are. If it's truly fair employment, your qualifications and all the other things, if the playing field were equal, all these programs would not be necessary in my opinion. But I think there's a reality that still prevails, that the playing field, with all the talk about diminishing affirmative action programs, the field is not quite level. But again, that should not discourage you or disappoint you, but prompt you to continue to try to find ways to overcome obstacles. Is what all of our ancestors have done, what we are trying to do, and what you will do. As gloomy as these observations might sound, I share the view of one of my mentors. And he would always say, these are not problems, these are just challenges and opportunities. And they are. You will be challenged to determine how best to prepare yourself for a business career in this changing environment. In addition to basic career preparations, plan a career path that places you in a profit center or line function within the corporation. Not to suggest that the non-line functions are unimportant, they are all important. But your accomplishments and performances can more readily be quantified when you're identified with the money that's made. Far too many women and minority groups, members in my generation, accepted positions within staff functions, such as human resources, equal employment opportunity, and other interesting but ultimately limiting perhaps in terms of career pathing. Some of the obvious line functions include sales, marketing, engineering, computer technology, law, finance, and those related disciplines. I would encourage you, as my sisters have, to consider Wall Street. It's where the money is, and too few of us pay attention to career opportunities there. The challenge is to be proactive in charting your career, Again, research the companies that you would consider working for. In addition to its business track record and Wall Street standing, one should also consider the products they make, their corporate philosophy and behavior rating on issues like minority women advancement, benefits, their views on environmental issues, community outreach, workplace issues, and the like. You might consider also thinking about developing a 3 to 5 year career plan. And we used to talk about that years ago, but I don't think we thought about it in the sense that we really have to do that. Because we thought about job security then, and the changing realities are telling us that you may have to start to create your own job security and career security. Because in the 21st century workplace, I foresee that there will be fewer and fewer gold watches or gold watch recipients given out. But the very bright side of the future, in my view, rests in the enormous opportunities you young men and women have as we enter the new millennium. And those opportunities are the many choices and options that especially women have. In addition to career options, you can decide whether you want to work for a small company, a medium-sized company, a large corporation, whether you want to work in whatever state, you might want to work outside of the country. As they say, the limits are only as vast as your imagination. 30 years ago, my contemporaries and I did not think that way. And you probably are starting to take some of these things for granted, but I assure you, a lot has changed in 30 years. I have not said much about the existence of racism and sexism in the workplace. But just as we find it in other places in society, it still exists in corporate America. As plaintiff in a race and gender-based discrimination lawsuit myself against a $70 billion corporation, I have felt racism and sexism personally. But given that these isms are still among us, it would be useful, again, as our sister says, to read up about employment law. It varies from state to state, so you might want to consider that if you're thinking about working in another state other than New York. And consider what appropriate, or read about what appropriate employer workplace behavior is as part of your career planning research. Since corporations are increasingly defining their employee benefits, packages related to health coverage, pensions, and retirement plans, I hope you will also establish a plan now for your personal management, money management, and investing. As young women and men, you may not view these matters as important now, but I assure you that they will be extremely important in the years to come. Especially if you find yourself working in a corporation that either does not have a pension plan or whose retirement arrangements are inadequate for your future financial goals. I hope you will also continue to monitor the discussion on Social Security reform that is underway, and factor these deliberations into your investment and retirement plan. As the children of baby boomers, these policy changes will have a direct financial impact on you and your progeny. I raise these issues because I am keenly interested in them as chair of the American Women's Forum for Economic Development Strategies. Our organization's mission, as Dr. Sala indicated, is to provide programs that teach the fundamentals of money management and investing to low to moderate income working families. We recently hosted, in cooperation with Cornell University's the Institute for Women at Work, a forum that examines Social Security reform and pensions in the next millennium. And I hope perhaps we might explore the possibility of a collaboration here at Medgar Evers that will be of assistance in related issues to women who are students here related to their financial security. Let me close by saying that as we prepare for this next millennium, which is only 2 years away, we've been talking about it for the last 5 years, but it's getting close. We, and especially our young people, have some exciting challenges ahead. While the focus of my remarks have been on jobs in corporate America. I hope our future leaders will continue to make educational strides in science, finance, and technology. We must not be strangers to Wall Street. Rather, we must actively participate as investors, analysts, brokers, and owners of stocks and bonds and mutual funds and all those instruments that have heretofore been not that familiar with us, to us, but they are increasingly becoming a part of the landscape because this change in reality, and all the speakers are talking about it, is related to the importance of being economically prepared for the future. Things are changing, resources are changing, but those who have access to financial security, those who have access to the money, generally has access to where the real power lies. And the two places that they say where money is, it's on Wall Street and it's in government. We pay our taxes on time, most of us. And Wall Street is always down there taking the money that is invested and hopefully making it grow. And if you're a participant in that arena, at any one of those levels, it is a place where there is enormous power and a place where there is enormous opportunities for careers down the road. As I mentioned, economics rules behavior in most human activity, and that is demonstrated in every aspect of our lives, I think. And it is that maxim and the 21st century realities ahead that will produce a new crop of thinkers, entrepreneurs, and corporate leaders, of which our ancestors and 20th century role models would be proud. Let me take this opportunity to extend my best to all the students here today and to wish you all luck in your careers. How many of your students and faculty? Okay, great. Well, I wish the same thing to everybody else. But you've heard this over and over again, students. You are our future. And I know sometimes it rings kind of dull to your ears, but I believe it, and I know the sisters here believe it and know it. You're special and you're admired, and you have a gift of great legacies. I hope you recognize them, I hope you utilize them, build upon them, and at every opportunity pass them on. I can't impress upon you more emphatically about thinking of careers that have a relationship to money matters. It's been my experience that money has been somehow demonized in some of our cultures. You know, money is the root of all evil. You don't want to be like that rich person because it'll change you. It'll make you evil. I don't think that's the case. And I suspect that rumor got bounded around by those who have the money and want to keep it. So it is okay to be wealthy. You can do wonderful things with wealth. And of course, as our sister said, if you're balanced and you have most of your priorities in place in a very balanced and importantly, spiritually centered way, in my opinion, you'll be fine. Thank you very much for inviting us to participate.
I know that everyone is tired and it's hot in here, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. I believe that in order for women of color or people of color to be prepared for corporate America, I think you have to be educated on what's happening, what the statistics are, and what the barriers are. That's why I'm here today. I spent the last couple years while completing my doctorate at Rutgers doing organizational consulting in consulting firms and at Prudential, and I've seen a lot of issues, which prompted me to spend this year at Catalyst. And how many of you have ever heard of Catalyst? Okay, not very many of you. And that's probably because Catalyst has been around since 1963, but Catalyst is an organization focused on the advancement of women in corporate America. And usually they've been more solely focused on white women's advancement in corporate America. But a year and a half ago, Catalyst realized that the issues facing women's advancement in corporate America were distinctly different than those barriers facing women of color advancing in corporate America. And they decided to look at that and to find out what the actual issues are. And this is the second year of this study, so I want to present to you the findings from this study. If you'll bear with me while I get the slide projector together. Can everyone see that, or is it too low?
Bring that up a little bit. Yeah.
Does anyone have a book? Is that visible?
Can you see in the back?
Does anyone have a book? Can you follow me? A thick book?
I think it's fine now. Yeah, that's good.
He's holding
But
the
it'll
book.
stay.
Bring that up.
Doesn't need to be in there.
No, I'm just, okay, here. Can everyone hear me? Yes. All right, just briefly, I just want to talk about the methodology for the study. There are two parts to the study, both a qualitative phase and a quantitative phase. During the qualitative phase, we looked at 15 different companies in the Fortune 500, conducted over 57 group interviews or focus groups, and conducted over 60 individual interviews with senior level women of color, CEOs, human resource executives, and diversity managers. We also extensively reviewed diversity policy materials at each of the companies. During the second phase of the study, which is the phase that I'll talk about in terms of the results, I'll focus on today, we distributed the survey to 30 Fortune 1000 companies. Over 6,500 surveys were distributed, and the industries were very diverse. Insurance, mail, packaging, chemical, publishing, retail companies. So it's a pretty diverse representation of companies. The study was conducted from November 1997 to January of '98. And we received in about 1,700 completed surveys, which is a pretty good response rate. This is a pretty extensive study. This is the first study of its kind looking at issues for women of color in corporate America. And of the 1,700 respondents, the majority of whom were African American women. I'm sorry, I'll sit down. So that's good. So a lot of what we saw come back, there was a large number of African American women. So it gave us, although I am interested in issues for all women of color, I have to say that I'm most interested in those of African American women. So that was a good response rate. And that's just the demographic breakdown of the respondents. about, and these were all management level women, okay? Low levels of management, mid-level, and then senior levels of management. We wanted to understand what they thought were the success factors to succeeding in corporate America. There were 5 top success factors that they found, that they identified. 1, being given high visibility projects or being included in high visibility projects, exceeding performance expectations, having an acceptable communication style, having, I think we heard a little bit earlier about mentors, but having an influential mentor or sponsor in the organization, and being able to informally network with influential colleagues, okay? And the comparative data here is versus white women. And white women, on some previous studies that Calais had conducted with white women saw that the most important factor was exceeding performance expectations. But women of color realized that that's not the only issue. I mean, they've exceeded performance expectations and it hasn't necessarily gotten them any success. So there are other issues there. There's some other things we've got to do too. Right. This is a quote from one African-American woman manager, and she says, "As the first person in my family or generation to get a college degree, I never learned about exposure in informal ways. African Americans are 20 years off in learning their way through the organizational culture, and it's more than performance and education that leads to advancement." And this is a breakdown by race. And in the red, you have African American women. 54% of African American women cited that it was high visibility projects, versus only 49% of them cited exceeding performance expectations. Also important, 50% cited acceptable communication style, 47% said that an influential mentor or sponsor was important, and 32% cited the informal networking, the opportunity to informally network with influential colleagues. So again, that's a breakdown by race. And the 3 ethnic groups that were included in the study were African American women, Hispanic women, and Asian American women. We also asked women what they perceived to be the barriers to advancement. And there were 4 that sort of came out as the top barriers. 1, again, this mentor or sponsor, but lack of a mentor or sponsor came out as one of the top barriers to advancement. Lack of informal networking, again, with influential colleagues. Lack of company role models of the same racial or ethnic group. And lack of high visibility assignments. So it's sort of like those same success factors re-emerged as barriers. And when we look at the mentor issue, again, we see 50% of African American women, and that's actually, this is a breakdown by level. The yellow bars are the upper level. Thank you. This is for each ethnic group. This is a breakdown by level. And of course, if you look at the Hispanic women, the Asian American women, and the African American women, the upper level women were the ones most likely to cite that mentoring was very, very necessary in advancement. And those would be the women that would know, the ones that made it. And so they're talking about their experiences, and this is what helps push them to the next level. So again, we see that mentoring is very important. Another thing that we looked at as a way to determine the success or the advancement opportunities of women of color was to look at the mean length of time in a job grade. And another way to think about it is the time spent in a position before promotion. The average number of years a person spends in a position before they're promoted. And we know that for white women, it's usually only 2.6 years. However, for women of color, they're usually spending about 3.6 years in a position before being promoted. And this is again a breakdown of each ethnic group, Asian American, Hispanic, and African American women. And again, you have your upper level women in the yellow. And you'll see that their average number of years is lower than the other middle and lower level women. So that shows you those women were sort of fast-tracked through their careers. and that's how they advance to senior management. We also asked women to think about the changes and their advancement opportunities over the past 5 years, to note whether they had improved, that they had seen no improvement, or actually whether their opportunities had declined over the last 5 years. And you'll see that the total women of color, let's see. Actually, one thing that might be important too is that white women, nearly 60% of white women felt like there had been an improvement in their opportunities for advancement, whereas only 47% of women of color felt that way. So something's happening for white women that's not happening for the women of color, clearly. I think, all right, I was going to make another point. We asked women how satisfied they were with their current situation. How satisfied women were with their current situation, both in terms of their job, in terms of their pay, and in terms of their advancement opportunities. And we found that African American women nearly, in terms of their job, 55.2% were pretty much satisfied. Only 48% were satisfied with their pay. But when you ask them about their future advancement opportunities, only 32% were able to say that they were satisfied. So it sort of indicates they saw that glass ceiling approaching if it hadn't already approached. We also asked the women to indicate whether or not they intended to remain at their company, which is another measure of satisfaction with the company. And African Americans were of the three ethnic groups, African Americans were the most likely to think about leaving. Okay? And we found that Hispanics, only 16.7% of them were likely to leave their company. And I think one finding throughout the study, affirmative action was very interesting. We asked the women whether or not they thought affirmative action had an impact on their career or had no impact on their career. And, some women, some ethnic groups were more likely to say that affirmative action had less of an impact, actually like Asian American women. But African American women were least likely to cite that affirmative action had no impact on their career. So there's a lot of internal dissension. And actually, it's not, I don't have it included in this data, but we also asked these women of color who they thought had benefited the greatest from affirmative action, and white women, yes. This is overwhelming, the response. This is a quote from another African American woman manager who stated that affirmative action has had a huge impact on my career. I was recruiting for the plans affirmative. Oftentimes, it gets us in the door, but it doesn't necessarily help us advance up the corporate ladder. And this was indicated again from our women. 45.6% felt like yes, it helped me get in the door, it helped with recruiting, but only 30.5% felt like it's helped in their promotion. So that's important to remember too.
One thing is very valuable in the School of Business. Please stand. In the School of Business is our internship coordinator, and I'm sure she's going to be asking each of you, what can you do for our students in the way of internship? So we want to thank all of you for joining us, and I'm sure you have a wealth of information. Do join us outside so that we can continue our interaction with our presenters. Thanks again.
So why is there any reason in particular she brought the two of you together? Are they all working on the same? Oh, corporate America, period. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll just have her first, and then I'll come into you. But I ask both of you the same question. All right. First, I'm going to ask you, you'll be coming to Medgar Evers College next semester in one of Miss Zeiler, is that her name?
Dr.
Zeiler, one of her classes, correct?
No, I'm part of an organization. I had an organization, the American Women's Forum for Economic Development Strategies. Prior to my joining this firm, I spent more than 25 years in the corporate sector.
Okay.
So the relevance of my being here was to participate in the discussion about blacks in corporate America and the expectations of students coming who are seeking careers in the corporate sector or in the business world, how they might derive some information from the experiences that the panelists had to share today. So that was the focus of the program.
Okay.
And in conjunction with Women's History Month.
Okay, all right.
Which is in here somewhere, I think.
Yes, it is.
Where is it?
Actually, I have a letter from the Dr.
Yeah,
Seiler
my
that I
letter
brought.
is,
That
yeah,
might
that's
be-
probably
that would
more
be-
telltale.
Yeah, it would be. Organization?
It's not a membership organization.
It's not a
It's a
membership.
research and education organization. We provide research and information related to the money management behavior of low to moderate income working individuals. Also, our programs are designed to teach fundamentals of money management and investing to that population.
Okay.
So it's twofold, research and education.
Okay, so for instance, if one of our students, I guess they're doing their research, how do they get in contact with the firm that you have here?
Well, we're located at 575 Madison Avenue in New York City. Our program, we just recently hosted a collaborative program with Cornell University that dealt with the Social Security reform and pension reform issue as it relates to working people. Those discussions are underway in the Congress, and the impact of those changes will have some direct effect on working people. Anybody who works in it and participates in the Social Security system. And if you work and you do or do not have a pension system, changes are going to take place as it relates to what is going to be there when you retire. So our programs have a relationship to those discussions and those deliberations, i.e. to suggest that since those changes will take place, the average working person, if they are not familiar with matters related to investing and retirement planning, they're going to be required to learn something about those things. So our programs are designed to provide fundamental information about a wide range of money management and investment education.
One of the, as a student here at Medgar Evers College myself, one of the questions that many students ask when we're in discussion is, in terms of these organizations, do they offer like internships where the students could like sit in on any of your discussions or seminars or workshops or anything you have going on within the organization?
At this juncture, we don't have a position like that at this juncture in our development. But we do envision, as our programs evolve, because we're planning to have regular seminars on these various issues. That's the establishment of an institute that is part of our long-range plan. We do anticipate having the involvement of students to either sit in on those programs or to sit not only to learn from the instructors, but to hopefully give them some insights onto the various careers that might be available as a result of either from the teaching standpoint, because most of our instructors will come from academia and the financial publishing arena.
Okay.
And our objective, the goal is to educate. And so this might be a stimulus for students to think in terms of careers there, as well as learning something about planning for their own money management.
Okay.
So that's, I think, the role that we see students, and also obviously parents will be there. Our focus is on low to moderate income working people. Some students are working people too.
Well, you'll find that here, Medgar.
Yeah, sure. So if you teach the parents and the adults in the family, hopefully they will relay that information to their children as well. So we see it as a family undertaking that everybody in the family will benefit from.
Okay. All right. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And this is yours.
You need that stuff?
No. Profession. What do you wanted our students here at Medgar Evers College to know about what you're involved in corporate America? Some of the key points.
Well, as I indicated in my remarks, I have been with a Fortune 500 company for approximately 7.5 years. I came to that company from the public sector, being a judge on the Superior Court in Washington, D.C. So I went from the public sector, the public servant, into an executive level position as a vice president for an electric utility. And as I said today to the students and to the faculty gathered here today, that a utility provides an excellent opportunity for women, and especially minority women, to participate in an industry and a work environment that historically has been predominantly male and predominantly white male. So I came here today to share with the students some of my observations in going into the private sector, a corporate setting, some of the expectations that I had and some that were had of me, expectations with respect to level of competency, expectations with respect to level of promptness, expectation of new technologies, learning a whole new vast area that in and of itself is going under restructuring. As I indicated to the students today, that the electric utility is in a restructuring mode that will have it somewhat akin to telecommunications. That is, that you will be able, after the new millennium, to select your supplier for electricity. And as the utility goes through these changes, and there's a lot of downsizing, there's a lot of mergers that are being talked about, there's a lot of new focuses on customer satisfaction, and there's a lot of new focus that has to be on competition and retaining your customer base and expanding that customer base. And so the importance of growth, the importance of lessening expenses to be competitive, and the importance of profits so that you can stimulate that growth through economic development, particularly with minorities. In Washington, D.C., we have a lot of minority vendors that contract with the utility, and to expand that base means that you're not only going to expand the economic climate for the district, but also to expand and improve the economic climate and quality of the life for minority people in that jurisdiction.
Okay. Another question, this will be my final question for you. A lot of students here, some of them doing accounting, some of them doing biology, and then they will come to me and they will say, well, Simone, I'm thinking about going to law school. Okay. I want you, okay, they're going to change shoulders here. Got it? All right, keep going. Can you tell me one of the some of them don't know for sure if they want to do it or not. So can you tell me how you got from working, being the vice president of corporate relations for Potomac Electric Power Company to being a judge? Because I find that very interesting.
Well,
when did you make that transition?
Well, the problem is that I was a judge before I went to PEPCO.
Okay.
I was a judge. I was appointed back in 1979 by President Carter. And so I served on the bench for over 10 years and then took senior status, retired in essence, took senior status and was recruited as of such to Potomac Electric Power Company. A search firm came and asked would I entertain leaving the bench. So I went from the judiciary to the private sector, and then from the private sector back to the judiciary. Very interesting. I've only been sitting now about 6 months, but there is a new approach that I have to evaluating, whether it's warrants, complaints, resolving disputes, knowing the city far better than I knew it before when I was sitting, because now coming back to the bench after being out in the community, as well as being involved with the legislature, as well as being involved with the politics. So I bring a different perspective than I had when I first started on the bench, and certainly what I had when I was sitting as a judge. I see the importance of education much more clearly than I think I understood it before sitting, because when you have involvement with education really young with students, and you have involvement in the community with respect to after-school programs and giving students something to hold on to, something to feel excited about, whether it's an after-school program, whether it's our mentoring program, whether it is the educational initiative that I helped start at PEPCO, that is to educate and train and to produce a level of excellence so that the company itself and all the companies that are in that region would have a pool to select from workers, so that you don't have to worry about having to train and spend that additional money on training once you've hired people into the workforce. The importance of education, the importance of family being involved in that education became more crystallized to me from the private sector. So now that I'm back on the bench, and I particularly get warrants with respect to young people, some juveniles, and I deal with a lot of domestic violence, and I deal with a lot of civil matters, that you can really see that had there been the proper foundation, some of these young people would not be before the courts today.
Okay. All right. Got that? Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Oh, stand up, Look at your white knee. Doesn't he look funny?
It looks normal to me.
Nod your head.
I don't know. I didn't want to be in it. That's why I told Jermaine not to put me in it. Huh? And there comes. This one
Here's the
coming
crew
in.
eating a bunch of grease smoke back here, ladies and gentlemen.
Ponytails. Why you didn't get me a plate?
Because you are pippy.